The city breathed smoke and rain, and the suitcase was already gone before I even learned its name. My client's hand shook like loose change in a jukebox, and her promise, it tasted like copper. Everyone wanted the same case, and none of them smiled. I took the job because truth has teeth, and I was tired of being bitten. If I found it, I'd inherit their attention. If I didn't, someone would die where the streetlights don't reach. The question remains, what's inside a case that makes killers polite? First stop, where stories get poured cheaper than whiskey, and memory floats like ash. The club sat in a basement that forgot how to climb. Smoke lay thick, a slow piano folded into the carpet, and the crowd pretended not to hear trouble practicing scales. I asked the bartender for water nobody drank. He slid a cloudy glass across the wood, like he wanted to keep the fingerprints friendly. His eyes could sort of lie from a sale and charge you double for each. I mentioned a suitcase. His jaw flinched, like it had hit a live wire. He looked past me, as if the bottle labels could offer him counsel. "Never heard of it," he said, which cost extra. When he followed with a price, he said the case held bearer bonds. Hotter than July. His fingers drummed a beat that didn't belong to the band. He was reading off a poster stapled to the back of his skull. Good ink, bad timing. I let the number he quoted pass my ear, like a moth looking for a lamp. An informant slid to my elbow, suit cheap enough to squeak, eyes clever enough to shush it. He breathed, "Photographs that end careers." I asked what kind of careers. He smiled, like he'd found a coin under a corpse. The kind that live in newspapers and die in basements. 2 versions already, both convenient, both designed for different sinners. I tasted the air. Someone was watching from the back, hat low, posture military, hands empty, glass untouched. He didn't drink. He didn't blink. He measured. Men who measure you aren't there for pleasure. I pressed the bartender for who brought the case through. He said a woman with red gloves and a clock in her eyes. The informant countered, courier with a stiff spine, not scared enough to be honest. The thing is, real couriers look bored, not brave. Someone wanted me thinking courier. I floated ledger pages. The bartender corrected me too fast. No paper. Then he swore he was just guessing. His tongue outran his story. I asked for the band leader's name. People who run music also run doors. He shrugged and told me, "I keep time, not secrets." Clean line, too clean, like a shirt worn over a bruise. I set a small bribe down where the bass notes could count it. The band leader cracked enough to let light through. There'd been a meeting last night. The suitcase visited the back room for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a luxury if you're switching a case, planning a rumor, or buying an exit. The watcher stood. His walk was precise, a metronome built for violence. He passed the bar like a rumor that paid its tab. I left the stool with 2 stories and a shadow. Both would follow me. At the door, a woman with eyes the city forgot to bill said, "Don't trust who looks safest." Warning or audition, I couldn't afford to grade it. The question remains, who benefits when multiple truths drift like cigarette ash, and everyone breathes at once? A man brushed me and left an envelope in my pocket. It was light in the telling, and lighter in the fact. Nothing inside but the smell of fresh ink. That was the first false lead. A message about messages. I didn't open it twice. I decided to flush a reaction. I said loud enough to clip ears that I had a line on the case's buyer. Cards folded, backs stiffened. The piano's left hand got shy. The watcher paused mid-door like a needle caught on the groove, then slipped out the side. I mapped his route in my head the way a coroner maps regret. The bartender leaned close. "You want my advice?" I told him I could afford it if it was free. "Leave it," he said. His eyes had changed. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting the room. That told me the room was rented by fear, and fear paid cash. The informant tugged my sleeve and sold me a crossroads. Names without faces, places without clocks, and a price that kept moving. I bought a fraction, just enough to keep him hungry. He said, "They'll all pay, banker, politician, the guy who reads prayers backward." He meant racketeer. He meant the city's unlisted directory. As the door closed behind me, the street coughed rain. The club had given me contradictions, a tale and a timeline. Therefore, I went where the rain erases footsteps, and men show you their shapes without meaning to. Out into the alley, where questions bleed faster. I carried nothing but the wrong answers and the promise of more. The alley took the rain and sharpened it. Street lamps turned each drop into a needle, and my coat into a bad umbrella and a worse shield. I moved like a man with nowhere urgent to be. People do their worst when they think you're tired. He closed in and brought the dead end with him. The wall smelled like rust and last chances. He didn't announce himself. Professionals don't. I told him to keep his hands where the shadows could see them. He reached anyway. I answered with a hard lesson to the ribs. He folded like a deck missing a king. He wheezed, and I gave him air at the price of answers. Who sent him? He coughed a name that wasn't a name. The committee. Committees don't exist until they do. I asked who pays dues. He spat rain and said, "Whoever needs the case most, tonight." Freelancer. Discipline in the posture, nothing in the eyes but wages. Loyalty can be bought. Discipline never calls in sick. I pressed. He gave me 3 buyers, a banker allergic to auditors, a politician who breaks mirrors before shaving, and a racketeer who fears silence more than sirens. Each buyer wanted a different fantasy folded into leather. The lie adapted to the listener. That meant the truth lived outside the suitcase. His hand twitched toward a pocket blade and found bricks instead. I reminded him of gravity. He broke enough to leak. Courier was bait. Red-gloved woman was theater. Someone staged a crowded truth to watch who salivated. I asked for a location. He coughed up a warehouse by the docks and a meet time that was already ash. Footsteps stitched the alley mouth. The watcher from the club brought company. Rain hid the number, but not the intent. I moved the tail where the bullets would have to argue with him first. They want the case more than your life, I told him. Think about your value. He answered with silence and fear. Finally, something honest. The first shot skipped off a trash can and sang flat. The second chewed brick near my ear, sloppy spread. They weren't carving epitaphs, they were herding. I took the fire escape. Rooftops don't lie. From above you can see who runs where and who pretends not to. 2 cars down the block blinked at each other without lights, rivals signaling like old lovers. Cooperation means pressure from above. I tucked the tail into a doorway and left him a benediction. Disappear before your next assignment gets graded. He muttered, "The case is empty," like a prayer he didn't understand. I filed it in a drawer labeled "Too Early to Be True." The watchers scanned the roofs, patient as a lit fuse. I moved like a rumor, present and gone. The city's heartbeat slowed as I angled toward the docks. Water makes liars quiet. It also keeps secrets with both hands. The warehouse kept its windows like eyelids at half-mast. Through the dirty pane, I saw silhouettes bargain over a ghost. I couldn't hear the words, but extortion dances the same steps in every room. A messenger peeled away with a smaller case while the big one stayed center stage. That smelled like decoy math and old comedy. I waited for the meeting to sag, then slipped through a pane that had already lost an argument. Broken things invite me. They know I won't judge. Inside, the big suitcase sat where a believer would bow. It had the look of a trap too proud to lie. I didn't open it. Not yet. I moved it 2 inches and listened for wires. Nothing but the echo of empty rooms. Footsteps returned, too soon, too many. My window closed, but the door to bad choices stayed open. I took the case. Sometimes you pick the lock, sometimes you pick the burden. I slid along shelving and breath, found the side exit, and met the rain again, like an old debt. The cars were gone. The watcher was not. He held distance like a leash and let me walk myself. Fine. I needed a quiet room and a loud conscience. On the way, I checked the seams with my fingers, and my luck. The lock was modest, the kind that wants to be believed. The handle wore fresh scuffs. The leather smelled of oil and a shop that knew the city by first name. If the case was a weather vane, tonight's wind was money. I pictured the banker counting alibis instead of dollars, the politician rehearsing a denial with his mouth open, the racketeer listening to silence and hearing betrayal. The thing is, emptiness isn't absence, it's invitation. Fill it with fear and sell tickets. I kept moving, the suitcase heavier for what it didn't carry. Behind me, footsteps decided to be somewhere else. Ahead of me, the rain wrote the next chapter on the street in wet ink. All I had to do was read fast. I chose an abandoned office over the precinct. The law likes answers, not the mess that breeds them. The building had a lobby full of echoes and a stairwell that creaked like an old confession. I took the 3rd floor because cowards hate stairs and heroes pretend not to. I'm neither when it rains. The room had a desk scarred by old truths, and a window that framed a fire escape like a bad idea. I set the suitcase down. The lock looked modest, the way a lie pretends to be shy. I let it sit there under the single bulb and called my client to rattle the cage. Her voice came wrapped in a tremor she couldn't swallow. I told her I had the case. She said, "Don't open it," with a second breath behind hers. Someone nearby, listening with their teeth. I hung up because warnings earn their keep after the fact. I cracked the lock. The case opened like a curtain that forgot its play. Empty. No bonds, no photographs, no ledger pages. Not even a moth willing to testify. The thing is, emptiness has a sound. This one roared. It said the object never mattered, only the orbit it forced. Footsteps tried the hall and then the knob. The door tested me with a gentle shake, the kind you give a sleeping animal when you're not sure it's asleep. I stepped to the side where a handshake could turn into a lesson. The watcher entered first, hat low, posture squared by a drill sergeant I would never meet. Two more framed him like parentheses. He said nothing. We all listened to the bulb hum. I saved us time. The case was bait, a weather vane for fear. Whoever ached for it most had just painted their face for the camera, and the city supplied the light. He blinked once, agreement, or as close as he gets. I asked who he belonged to. He answered by not shooting me. Mercy is a uniform if you stare long enough. We played it out without moving pieces. Banker, politician, racketeer. Each had spent favors and nerves, pushed assets toward a box. Wiretaps weren't needed. Eyes were enough. The committee wasn't a group. It was a mirror held at throat height. Lean in and you cut yourself. The client's shake made sense. She hadn't carried cargo. She'd carried rumor. I checked the lining, because habit feeds me when luck won't. A maker's mark hid in the seam. A neat stamp from a luggage shop that did friendly business with the racketeer's men. It pointed without proving, which is the language rumor speaks at breakfast. The watcher finally spoke. "You weren't supposed to open it yet." I told him calendars and I don't speak. The day belongs to whoever shows up armed and curious. He set terms. Walk away and live. Stay and make records that get shredded by sunrise. I offered a trade. I walk, he leaves the client alone. She's a pawn that got tired of the board. He measured me the way a tailor measures a casket. Decided I was cheaper than a war. Nodded once, and they ghosted out, leaving the door ajar like a suggestion. She arrived not long after, rain on her lashes and a backbone trying to hold the line. She looked at the open mouth of the case and flinched at the noise it made. She admitted the pitch. Start a panic. Map the reactions. The faction behind the curtain wanted to see who loved the rumor, who feared the truth, and who tried to buy both. She thought leverage sat inside leather. Turns out, leverage sat in her hands and wore her face. I pressed for the designer. She gave me a name that felt like a smudge. Real to her, useless to me. That's how brokers of belief stay fed. They rent chaos by the hour and accept payment in confessions. I laid it out for her. The club seeded conflict. The alley confirmed factions. The warehouse proved a stage. The office revealed the act. The empty case wasn't a failure. It was the weapon, not to hold truth, but to sell panic. I told her to leave town tonight, to forget the weight of nothing before it remembered her address. She asked what happens to the factions. I told her they go back to pretending they're different, until the next mirror tells them otherwise. She nodded like a verdict, and left a silence that felt earned. I kept the suitcase. Sometimes you carry what isn't there, to remember what is. The bulb flickered. The city exhaled. One last door waited. The precinct back room, where men with badges borrow darkness and return it with interest. I pocketed the maker's mark with my eyes and headed for a deal I wouldn't like and couldn't afford not to make. The back room smelled like old ink and promises that never saw daylight. I brought the empty case like a confession that didn't know what it had done. The lieutenant stared at the leather, then at me, then at the door, deciding which one would lie first. He asked the wrong question. What was in it? I said, belief. He didn't write that down. We traded silences until they had no resale value. I laid out a map without streets, who called whom, who sent cars, who didn't sleep. Banker, politician, racketeer. 3 hands playing the same phantom. He listened the way good men listen when they hope they're not involved. His pencil didn't move. That meant the deal was already walking. Wiretaps, he asked. I shook my head. Eyes. They were counting reflections. He nodded like a priest at a funeral. We negotiated the kind of peace you carry in your pocket and spend only when you can't avoid it. I give him the pattern of reaction. He gives me tomorrow without a patrol car in the wrong mirror. He hinted at a shadow broker, the kind you never catch standing still. Rents chaos by the hour, he said. Clients pay in things they can't admit they own. I asked for an address. He handed me a riddle. Follow the people who suddenly love each other. In this town, affection is a symptom. I left the case on the table. It looked guilty of something it hadn't done, which made it perfect evidence for a city that liked its answers performative. Outside, a newspaper truck coughed headlines about ball games and ribbon cuttings. When nothing important makes the page, I know I'm early, or I'm late. The maker's mark from the lining stayed with me like a thorn you can't show a doctor. I walked it to a luggage shop where the proprietor's smile came stapled to caution. He recognized the stamp and the trouble. We sell to everyone who pays, he said, which is how a single man becomes a dozen names. Receipts? None that survived the flood of loyalty kept behind the counter. The bell rang. A courier stepped in, saw my face, and learned a new exit. Fear is a compass. I took a walk around the block and found a dead drop under a lamppost. Empty envelope, fresh ink. The same practical joke with teeth. The broker was speaking in absences. The city answered with footsteps. I turned toward my office. Endings don't like crowds. The empty suitcase sits under my desk, like a stray that never learned tricks. The rain softens the city's voice. Liars prefer the noise. My client keeps her ticket and her distance. The factions pretend to be strangers again. Truth didn't vanish. It picked a side and started charging rent. We paid in nerves and sleep. The door will click again soon. Tell me what you think in the comments. Did we miss a clue that matters? Subscribe to follow the trail on the next investigation. And hit like if you want more cases that bleed in the dark. Subscribe for the next case file, where the shadows only get deeper.
Subscribe.